Imagine a retail empire that dictates global supply chains, commands hundreds of billions in annual revenue, and employs more people than the entire populations of several sovereign nations. Logic dictates such a colossal titan must be born in the gleaming financial districts of New York or the high-tech incubators of Silicon Valley. Yet, the most formidable corporate juggernaut of the 20th century emerged from a dusty, unassuming town of barely 5,000 people nestled deep in the Ozark Mountains. How did a seemingly ordinary merchant, routinely dismissed by the aristocratic titans of his era as a mere rural novelty, execute a counterintuitive strategy that utterly annihilated the competition? The answer lies not in a luxurious boardroom, but in the relentless, penny-pinching obsession of a man who saw an invisible, highly lucrative market that the rest of the industrialized world completely ignored. Long before the brand name became synonymous with global commerce, Sam Walton was simply a man trying to carve out a living in the turbulent economy of post-war America. Returning home from military service, he borrowed a substantial sum of money from his father-in-law to purchase a modest Ben Franklin variety store franchise in Newport, Arkansas. It was precisely here, while sweeping wooden floors and physically stocking dusty shelves, that the foundational DNA of his future empire was meticulously forged. He became fiercely obsessed with the mathematics of volume, realizing early on that selling a massive quantity of goods at a razor-thin margin generated significantly more absolute profit than selling fewer items at a high markup. He relentlessly scoured secondary suppliers to find cheaper goods, passing those exact savings directly to his customers, a radical, almost heretical departure from the standard retail practices of the late 1940s. This early, hard-fought success rapidly bred an unexpected and nearly fatal crisis. His Newport store became so incredibly profitable that his landlord flatly refused to renew the building lease, intending instead to hand the highly lucrative, fully established location directly over to his own son. It was a devastating existential blow that would have easily ruined a less resilient entrepreneur, stripping away years of grueling labor in a single signature. Instead of folding under the pressure, the evicted merchant packed up his entire family and moved to Bentonville, another small town where he was forced to start completely over from scratch. This brutal eviction instilled a fierce independence and a deep-seated, lifelong paranoia about relying on outside forces, driving an insatiable, burning need to own his destiny and his real estate outright. The broader retail landscape of the mid-20th century was rigidly stratified and deeply arrogant. Established corporate Goliaths like Sears and Kmart focused their massive financial resources strictly on major metropolitan areas, operating under the firm belief that populations under 50,000 simply could not support the economics of large discount stores. Rural America was effectively abandoned by the establishment, left to rely entirely on small, overpriced mom-and-pop shops with highly limited inventory and restrictive hours. The prevailing corporate wisdom of the era dictated that building massive retail footprints in isolated farm towns was a fool's errand, a guaranteed path to immediate bankruptcy. This massive institutional blind spot created a vast, untapped economic vacuum stretching across the entire American heartland. In 1962, that vast vacuum was finally pierced. At the age of 44, a time when many men comfortably settle into the twilight of their careers, Walton took the ultimate financial gamble and opened the first official Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas. It was a sprawling, bare-bones discount city, entirely devoid of the polished aesthetics, soft lighting, and refined displays of metropolitan department stores. The opening day was not a glamorous red carpet affair. It was wonderfully chaotic, marked by sweltering summer heat, overripe watermelons literally popping on the asphalt pavement, and live donkeys roaming the dirt parking lot to entertain local children. Yet, beneath this highly unrefined, chaotic exterior lay a razor-sharp, mathematically precise pricing model that immediately captivated the financially constrained local population. The absolute bedrock of this new, unpolished enterprise was a conceptual framework that would eventually upend the mechanics of global commerce. Everyday low prices. Unlike legacy competitors who relied heavily on deceptive high-low pricing, artificially inflating base costs only to slash them dramatically during heavily advertised weekend sales events, this new model promised the absolute lowest possible price on every single item, every single day of the year. Executing this required an ascetic, almost monastic corporate culture where every saved penny was treated as a sacred operational victory. It was a fundamental promise of trust to the working-class consumer, guaranteeing that they would never be price gouged. a psychological philosophy that built an unshakable, almost fanatical customer loyalty across the region. With the Rogers location definitively proving the viability of the concept, a relentless, highly unorthodox expansion phase began. The counterintuitive strategy was to ignore the lucrative cities entirely and build outward in tight, concentric circles from small towns, a methodical approach later known in business schools as the hub and spoke model. Massive discount stores were aggressively placed in rural towns with populations as small as 5,000, deliberately saturating isolated counties until they practically suffocated any local retail competition. By the time the urban retail giants finally realized what was quietly happening in the distant countryside, they were already surrounded by an impenetrable, highly profitable fortress of rural discount stores. Sustaining this aggressive, rapid-fire rural saturation required solving a massive logistical nightmare that had previously deterred the larger chains. Delivering thousands of diverse products to highly remote locations without completely destroying the razor-thin profit margins demanded a total revolution in supply chain management. The brilliant defining solution was cross-docking, a highly efficient logistical practice where materials are unloaded from an incoming semi-trailer truck and loaded directly into outbound, store-bound trucks with little or no storage time in between. This relentless motion drastically reduced expensive warehouse costs, minimized inventory holding times, and ensured that shelves in the most isolated, forgotten towns remained fully stocked at a mere fraction of the traditional distribution cost. The invisible, sprawling architecture of this growing empire soon became far more impressive and complex than the physical storefronts themselves. Massive, highly automated distribution centers were rapidly constructed in strategic, rural locations, serving as the massive beating hearts of the regional retail network. A massive fleet of company-owned trucks, driven by a fiercely dedicated army of long-haul drivers, moved merchandise day and night with the precision of a military operation. This highly synchronized logistical ballet allowed the company to bypass traditional middlemen and wholesalers entirely, negotiating directly with global manufacturers and commanding unprecedented volume discounts that competitors simply could not match or comprehend. To continuously fuel this incredibly capital-intensive infrastructure, the rapidly growing company required massive external funding beyond what local banks could provide. In 1970, the enterprise officially went public, offering its shares to outside investors on the open market. This massive injection of Wall Street capital acted as high-octane rocket fuel for the hub-and-spoke expansion, funding the immediate construction of even larger distribution centers and a rapid, aggressive acceleration of store openings across the South and the Midwest. Early, loyal investors, including many store managers and hourly cashiers who bought shares through employee programs, would eventually see their modest investments transform into staggering, multi-million-dollar fortunes. Despite the massive influx of Wall Street capital and newfound corporate prestige, the executive culture remained fiercely, almost stubbornly grounded in its humble Ozark roots. The founder absolutely refused to manage his growing empire from an isolated ivory tower, instead piloting his own twin-engine plane to physically visit hundreds of individual stores every single year. He would land in tiny, small-town airports, rent a modest car, and walk the retail aisles, interrogating store managers, listening intently to hourly associates, and obsessively checking his competitors' price tags. This hyper-local, intensely hands-on leadership style ensured that the sprawling corporate behemoth never lost touch with the granular, day-to-day realities of the retail floor. Behind the folksy, unassuming small-town image lay a ruthless, highly aggressive embrace of cutting-edge corporate technology. Long before the modern internet era transformed business, the company recognized that digital information was just as valuable as physical inventory sitting on a shelf. They were aggressive pioneers in adopting universal product codes, commonly known as barcodes, across all merchandise, allowing for precise, real-time tracking of exactly what was selling and what was sitting stagnant. By the late 1980s, they had audaciously launched their own private satellite network, the largest of its kind anywhere outside the federal government, linking every single cash register directly to the Bentonville headquarters and the sprawling distribution centers. This unprecedented fusion of rural market saturation, supply chain supremacy, and real-time data analytics created an absolutely unstoppable, crushing momentum. As the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, the once-ignored country merchant aggressively pushed out of its southern stronghold and into undeniable national prominence. The old guard of retail, the previously untouchable Sears and Kmart, suddenly found themselves entirely outmaneuvered, their bloated corporate structures and highly inefficient supply chains completely unable to compete with the lean, technologically advanced predator that had quietly surrounded them. The inevitable tipping point had finally been reached. The rural underdog was now the undisputed heavyweight king of American retail. Yet, this unprecedented level of market dominance carried profound, often painful consequences for the broader national economy. The company's relentless, unyielding demand for ever lower prices exerted crushing, existential pressure on external suppliers, forcing them to relentlessly cut their own operational costs, which frequently led to the mass offshoring of American manufacturing to cheaper labor markets abroad. The arrival of the massive blue and white big box in a new town frequently spelled the immediate demise of the historic downtown shopping district, as multi-generational family businesses simply could not survive the onslaught of deeply discounted merchandise. The empire brought undeniable, life-changing savings to the working class, but it fundamentally and permanently altered the economic fabric of the communities it served. Within the sprawling walls of the massive stores, the corporate culture was equally demanding and highly controversial. The foundational philosophy of extreme thrift applied not just to complex supply chains, but directly to overhead, benefits, and hourly wages. The company fiercely and successfully resisted unionization efforts, maintaining strict, uncompromising control over its massive labor force to protect its razor-thin profit margins. Associates were nominally referred to as partners, heavily incentivized by lucrative stock options in the early growth days. But as the workforce swelled into the millions, the harsh reality of low hourly wages and minimal healthcare benefits became a massive flashpoint for national political debate. The human engine of the empire was incredibly vast, heavily managed, and perpetually squeezed for maximum operational efficiency. As the immense physical toll of continuously building a global juggernaut finally caught up with him, the brilliant architect of this retail revolution faced his final, unwinnable battle with illness. In 1992, shortly before his passing, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a high-profile testament to his profound, undeniable impact on the American economy. He utilized his final days to meticulously secure the company's future, ensuring that the foundational principles of thrift, relentless operational improvement, and the absolute prioritization of the customer remained permanently hardwired into the corporate consciousness. The delicate transition from a highly centralized, founder-led startup to a self-sustaining, institutional monolith was complete. The powerful echoes of that final transition resonated far beyond the physical borders of the United States. In the ensuing decades, the enterprise aggressively expanded internationally, exporting its highly tuned logistical models and ruthless pricing strategies to diverse markets across the globe. It became an independent economic indicator in its own right, its daily sales data heavily scrutinized by central banks, and its massive supply chain decisions fully capable of shifting the delicate balance of global trade. Economists eventually coined the term the Walmart effect to formally describe how the sheer, unprecedented scale of the company's operations actively suppressed national inflation rates, a staggering testament to a level of market power rarely seen in human history. Today, the sprawling, intricate network of massive distribution centers, the continuous satellite uplinks, and the millions of blue-vested employees stand as a towering monument to an unyielding, deeply contrarian vision. The modern titans of digital e-commerce, with their complex algorithmic pricing and rapid delivery networks, are merely iterating on the foundational logistical architecture first laid down in the dusty, unpaved parking lots of the Ozarks. The empire did not conquer the globe by inventing a shiny new consumer product, but by completely and ruthlessly reimagining the hidden mechanics of how products move from creation to consumption. The counterintuitive strategy of quietly building immense structural power in the forgotten shadows of small-town America proved to be a historic masterclass in asymmetric corporate warfare. By the time the arrogant establishment finally recognized the mortal threat, the physical infrastructure was already too vast, the supply chains too incredibly efficient, and the customer loyalty too deeply entrenched to be dismantled. The painful eviction in Newport, once viewed as a devastating personal setback, had ultimately catalyzed a relentless, unstoppable drive that fundamentally reshaped global commerce. The critical lessons of that pivotal pivot never faded from the corporate DNA. The story of this monumental, world-altering rise is a stark, undeniable reminder that true industry disruption rarely originates in the wealthy center of the establishment. It quietly brews on the forgotten periphery, driven entirely by those willing to look exactly where others will not, and to build with relentless, unglamorous efficiency. From a single, chaotic storefront in Rogers, Arkansas, to the undisputed zenith of global retail dominance, the enduring legacy of Sam Walton remains a powerful testament to the sheer, unstoppable force of a perfectly executed, deeply contrarian vision.